He walked with the swagger of someone who believed the badge made him untouchable. To him, authority was not about service. It was about domination. The target that night was a black man, quietly driving home, unaware of the storm about to unfold. The officer's suspicion had no basis, no crime, no cause, only skin color. Power mixed with prejudice is a dangerous weapon, and in that moment, it was pointed directly at an innocent man. But what the officer didn't realize was that his arrogance had led him to the wrong person, because this man carried an identity that would not just level the field, but flip the balance of power in a way that would leave the officer's world shattered. It had started as an ordinary evening, the kind of routine that rarely draws attention. The black man had finished a long day at work, his briefcase resting quietly on the seat beside him. The city lights blurred past his windshield as he drove home, mind focused on nothing more than dinner and rest. To anyone watching, he was just another man heading home. But to him, every shadow on the street carried weight. Experience had taught him that calm nights could shift in an instant. The road stretched out ahead, empty yet heavy, the silence broken only by the hum of his engine. He had taken this route countless times, yet tonight it felt different. Perhaps it was instinct, perhaps memory, but there was a tension in the air, the kind that makes the back of your neck tighten. He adjusted his mirror, scanning the dark, unaware that behind him, a patrol car was already watching. This was not a neighborhood known for trouble. Families lived here. Children played here. Yet prejudice does not need reason, and suspicion does not need truth. For men like him, normalcy was fragile, always vulnerable to the gaze of authority. He carried himself with dignity, but beneath that composure lived the knowledge that dignity was too often ignored. Far down the road, the faint glow of headlights drew closer. They weren't speeding, they weren't passing, just following. Too steady, too deliberate. A chill crept through the night air, the kind that whispered warning. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, reminding himself to remain calm, because he knew what could come next. He knew that ordinary nights could twist into stories that end in headlines, and he knew that sometimes survival wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about whether the officer behind the wheel decided his life was worth respecting. The patrol car lingered behind him, close enough to unsettle, far enough to appear casual. Yet there was nothing casual about the way its headlights clung to his rear-view mirror. Each passing second stretched in, each turn of the wheel heavy with calculation. He slowed slightly, giving space, hoping it might drift away. It did not. Instead, the glow grew brighter, tighter, an unspoken warning that the officer had chosen him. Then came the sound he had learned to dread, the sudden burst of sirens cutting through the stillness. Red and blue bled into the night as he pulled to the side of the road. His pulse quickened, not from guilt but from memory. Stories of men who had also pulled over, men whose compliance had not saved them. Survival meant stillness. Survival meant restraint. Survival meant hoping this officer was different. But the footsteps approaching told him otherwise. They were not cautious or neutral. They carried the rhythm of arrogance, the steady beat of a man convinced he owned the night. Even without words, the officer's posture spoke volumes. Broad stance, deliberate slowness, every gesture a performance of power. Inside the car, the black man remained composed, though unease pressed against him like a rising tide. He thought of the briefcase beside him, a simple object that held more authority than the figure outside his window. But now was not the time to reveal it. Now was the time to endure. The officer lingered, circling, as if the silence itself were a weapon. A flashlight cut through the interior, pausing just long enough to send a message. Suspicion first, evidence later. His presence suggested wrongdoing, even though no law had been broken, and that was the cruelty of it. Guilt was not the starting point. Race was. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. The man's grip on the steering wheel tightened, his breathing steady but deep. He knew that a single wrong movement, too quick, too sharp, too misunderstood, could ignite a tragedy. This was not just an inconvenience. This was danger disguised as procedure. The longer it dragged on, the clearer the intent became. This was not a traffic stop. It was a test, an exercise in control, a ritual of humiliation masked as duty. And as the officer's shadow loomed larger, the air thickened with unspoken threat. Still, he held his ground. His calm was deliberate, his silence intentional, because every second that passed carried him closer to the moment that would turn this entire encounter upside down. The officer believed he was in control. He believed this was another routine show of dominance, another night where power went unquestioned. But arrogance has a way of blinding men to the storm they are walking into. Behind the composure of the man in the car, behind the quiet restraint, was a truth waiting to surface. It was not fear that held him still, it was patience. Because when the mass of authority finally cracked, when the arrogance reached its peak, that truth would break free. And when it did, the silence of this night would shatter, not with violence, not with chaos, but with revelation so sharp, it would cut straight through the illusion of power. The silence was thick enough to crush the air. The officer stood tall, posture heavy with arrogance, convinced the man in the car was shrinking beneath his presence. But inside, the black man's resolve only hardened. Every humiliating pause, every unnecessary delay, every unspoken accusation was being carefully measured. This was not fear, it was calculation. The officer leaned closer, scanning as though searching for flaws that did not exist. His authority was not in the law, but in the belief that his word would always outweigh another's truth. And for a moment, it seemed he was right. He was in control. He had the power. But in responsibility that stretched far beyond this night. The tables had turned, yet the black man did not gloat. His calm remained unbroken, his composure steady, for he understood this moment was larger than two individuals on a dark road. This was not about bruised egos. It was about exposing what arrogance and prejudice create when left unchecked. For the officer, shame burned hotter than any flashing light. Every step he had taken, every ounce of superiority he had poured into the stop, had only built the stage for his own undoing. And as realization spread across his face, the unspoken truth was undeniable. The power he thought he owned had never belonged to him. It belonged to the system that enabled him. And tonight, that system had met its reckoning. The black man knew this was not the first time, nor would it be the last. His position gave him influence, but it did not erase the reality of millions of others who did not have a briefcase to shield them, who faced the same flashing lights without protection. That was a haunting weight of all. His survival was not proof of justice, but a reminder of how rare justice could be. The night faded back into silence, but the echo of the encounter lingered. For one man, it was the end of unchecked arrogance. For the other, it was another burden added to a lifetime of carrying truths the world still refuses to face. And for those who hear this story, the lesson is sharp and unavoidable. Prejudice disguised as authority is not strength. It is weakness waiting to be exposed. And so the question remains, one that refuses to fade. How many more lives must be tested by flashing lights before the system itself is forced to change?